Hello. Maybe you're finding this lockdown in Melbourne hard with not being able to go wherever you want and not able to see your friends. But I want you to imagine that you're in a worse lockdown, much worse, where you and your family are owned by someone else, where you probably couldn't go to school, where you and the rest of your family have to work and not get paid, where you don't get to choose where you live, where you're never allowed to leave because someone else owns you. Now, when people are owned by someone else and they have to work for them without getting paid, they're called slaves. And the owner can buy or sell slaves just like animals. And slavery has often existed all over the world in different countries. Even in our own country, Indigenous Australians were sometimes treated like slaves. But we're going to think today about slaves who were in America, in the United States of America, and in countries nearby. This is a picture of slaves. It's a pretty old photo. It was taken 170 years ago, just when people were starting to use photography. And those slaves would have been transported, their families, from Africa in ships to America and to different countries, and that's where they were used. And that's people at the time thought that was okay. Like the government said it was all right, and people thought that's the way it was. We would be ashamed today. And there were people in a country far away from America, England, who were ashamed and thought that things should change. And one of these people was called William Wilberforce. Here's a picture of William. Now, William had been taught about God and about following Jesus when he was young, but as he grew up, he didn't think much about God and he just enjoyed life. He was very good at talking with people and at making speeches, and he was ended up being a politician. And politicians are people who work in Parliament and in government and make laws for the land, and he was very good at that. This is a picture of the Houses of Parliament in London, not our Australian ones. Very famous buildings, and that's where William worked, and he was a good politician. But then a really wonderful thing happened in William's life, and it's probably the best thing that can happen in someone's life. He decided he would really follow Jesus. He would become a real committed Christian, follow Jesus, and he knew that his new faith had to mean that he did some things that showed he had this faith. He would show his faith by the good things he did. And that's what the grown-ups have been learning about in sermons this month. And so he went to his friends and he said, now, should I stop being a politician and do something else? And they said, no, William, you're a good politician. You should keep on being a politician and maybe you can make good laws and change things. So that's what William did. And from then on, he worked really hard with a group of his friends, and they used to meet in a place called Clapham. They were called the Clapham Sect. A sect means a group. And they worked hard to try and change the laws about slavery. Now, in England, people didn't have slaves in their houses, but people in England owned the ships that were transporting the slaves from Africa to America, and they also owned properties and farms in other countries where they were using slaves. So they didn't think slavery was wrong because they were making money out of it. So William tried to change the laws for that. And to do this, he had to show perseverance. I wonder if you know what perseverance means. I'll show you a picture of a plant. I wonder if you notice that plant is growing all amongst cement and rocks, which is not very good for plants, but it's still trying to grow. And perseverance means trying and trying to keep doing things even though it's going to be difficult and you don't think you're succeeding. So that's what William did. He and his friends tried very hard for a long time to try and get the laws changed. And he had to wait. The laws were changed, but the first law to be changed was about people owning ships that transported the slaves. And it took from the time William made his first speech, not 5 years, not 10 years, not 15 years, but 18 years from when he made his first speech until that law about transporting slaves in ships owned by English people was changed. But then people were still using slaves on their properties, and so William worked hard to get the next law, and other people worked hard to get the law about using slaves on their farms being changed. And it took from then, so from when the law about the ships was passed, it took not 5, not 10, not 15, not 20, but 26 years. So that's 44 years altogether for a law to be passed where people could not use slaves on their farms. So that's a long time, and I'm sure you can realise that William used perseverance to get there. So that's the story of William Wilberforce and his group of friends. And there's actually it didn't stop slavery through the world, but it did actually make a difference and started people all over the world in different countries thinking that slavery, or having slaves, was not okay. And here's a plaque that's in part where that's in London, where that tells us about William. You can see that. And that says, I'll read it out for you. William Wilberforce and the Clapham sect, remember they were a group of people who worshipped near a place called Clapham, worshipped in this church. Their campaigning resulted in the abolition of slavery in British dominions in 1833. So we remember William today, and all people do, and I hope you can remember William too.